Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Who could complain on a day like today? Not me. No way. I'm not going to do it. Things are going great. We're going to have a great time this morning. Everything's happening at once, which we love. We love when everything's happening at once. What are folks saying in the chat? We got JJ Fox first up this morning. Happy Hal Finney Memorial Day, gang. Sometimes when you believe in something is hard, so hard, but nothing seems to change. Just run a node. It might just catch on. Very good. Well wishes for the Hal Finney memory that we all have. Be like Hal, run a node today. It's easy, says JJ Fox. Seaberger, God bless Hal Finney, gone too soon. May the 4th be with you all. I didn't realize that Hal Finney Day was actually May the 4th. The simulation winking at us again. We love it. JJ Fox. Good morning, gang. Barely 45 Chatelet. I have yet to grow tired of winning. Maybe just a little more winning. Good morning, team. Good morning, Matt. Good morning, Lee J369. Gang. Good morning indeed. We are now over our quota of exclamations. You are on notice. You've spent all of your exclamations this morning. No more exclamations. We're not doing it. No way. We got JJ Fox reminding us after a brief time at 80,000 US trash tokens, Bitcoin back down to 78,000 US trash tokens. We're at block number 947,872. There you go. An entire month's worth blown in a day of exclamation points. We use them all. Guilty. I use exclamation points all the time. Good morning, gang. Good morning, CB Van. And congrats to Les Habitants for advancing last night. Indeed, the Montreal Canadiens won last night. Game 7 against Tampa Bay. There you go. I watched it. Lots of people here watched it. I could hear the whole city screaming and celebrating, and lots of horn honking that was going on as they won. They didn't play great, but it doesn't matter. They scored more goals, and that's all that matters in the game of ice hockey. So it was fun. Sorry to any Tampa Bay fans out there. Is that hockey talk? It is hockey talk. Indeed. We got Tardy Nolan let's guess, making waffles. No, Tardy Stan must have a leader. Tech rant. No, it was your regular run-of-the-mill tardiness today. Just was ahead, fell behind. Can't be the Kites. Wrong studio. Yeah, just sometimes when I'm ahead, which I was, my children spent the night with grandma last night, way over in the mountains that you see behind me on a clear day. And so we were empty nesters last night for the night and today as well. So it was actually all the extra time that I had. It was all the extra time that I had. So that's what killed me. You don't want too much. Gone are the days of the classic unhinged Nolan tech and Roxanne doesn't want TMZ getting a hold of those. That's very fun. That is the sun behind him. Yeah, we don't have too much sun today. We don't have too much sun today. Did Tampa even know there was a game yesterday? I think that it was streaming like reflected off the window. Looked like the sun. What are we talking about? Looks like the sunrise. Raise the mug. Yeah, something like that. We're doing okay, though. We're doing okay, indeed. We should acknowledge that that is the sun behind me. We've got a major sunrise on our hands. We're doing great with the sun. Bitcoin, as we just said, running 78,000 US trash tokens per Bitcoin. Am I low? I'm wearing the famous digital 1776 shirt again today. We love it. It's a great shirt. So we got the Bitcoin running. We got the Bitcoin doing great. We got the sun doing great. Let's have a coffee. Talk about what's new. There we go. Oh yeah, there you go. The light bulb reflects off the window. I want that shirt. Yeah, the light bulb, maybe if I switch it a little, you'll get less reflections. Maybe that took care of it because it was a little off from the Canada show. I adjusted it a little bit. I think that's better, huh? I think that erased light reflection. Did you see St. Louis doing the Wolf of Wall Street chest thump thing? Yeah, for a second. I thought same. You know what I learned about St. Louis? He doesn't even go into the room with the players during the intermission or at the end of the game. Wouldn't that be great? Was it tricking my eye? Looked like the sun. No sun. We had a beautiful sunrise today, like really epically amazing. And but it often happens when there's a little crack on the horizon where there's no coverage. So, and then there is total cloud cover. So if it comes into that crack, you get all the red that just hit off the canopy of clouds that are there. So this morning was one of those rare instances where that happened. It's good stuff. Very good stuff. Okay, we need some fake news. We need some fake news here. We got to see what the NPCs are saying. There's a lot going on in their life, and I shall share it all with you now. Oh, can't share screen? What? What? No. There you go. I don't know why it said I couldn't share screen. I had to do it slightly differently, but I can share screen. How a boomer lib wine importer took down Trump's tariffs. Yes, indeed. Isn't that so important that we can't have a manufacturing base in America because the spreads of these boomer lib wine importers just get crushed, right? Just crushed. You don't get to actually have a manufacturing base anymore, guys. There's California wine producers out there that have profits to maintain. Come on. He took them down. Good job, boomer libs. We get this also from Amsterdam. Dutch city bans advertising for Burger King Whoppers, fossil fuels, and other elements of high carbon lifestyle. You can no longer advertise steak or burgers in Amsterdam. You can, however, go window shopping for whores and buy any drug you'd like, but you cannot see advertisements for burgers or gasoline. Those are now verboten in Holland. Makes sense. It obviously makes sense. I'm going to go window shopping for a whore. I'm going to take some drugs. But God forbid I see a little Big Mac ad out there that isn't for vegetarian Big Macs. So that's what's going on in Amsterdam, if you were wondering how bad things are getting. We get this. Get out of here, you stupid ad. We get this. Climate change is getting so bad that it's making food less nutritious. Guys, it's so hot that the food nutrition is going down. The diets we eat today have less nutritional density than what our grandparents ate. Guys, even without the ad ban in Holland, it's getting bad. It's already bad. We get this. Increasingly CO2 suffused atmosphere is causing the plants we eat to be less nutritious. They hate the carbon dioxide. Though the changes are subtle, they could already be endangering millions of people with poor diets and hundreds of millions if the trend holds in the coming decades. The diets we eat today have less nutritional density than what our grandparents ate, even if we eat exactly the same thing. So guys, remember, if you just recycle more and don't use your car as much, even though you'll have less overall food, it will be more nutritious. It's going to be no more. Plants thrive off CO2, converting into sugars that provide them energy. So it may sound counterintuitive that more CO2 would be making them less nutritious, but their nutritional value to us at least comes from minerals absorbed through the soil. The greenhouse gas may help the crops grow bigger and faster, but the nutritional uptake remains the same, diluting their concentration, according to WAPO. That's science, guys. That's not all. The overabundance of CO2 means plants don't need to open their microscopic pores. Guys, they're not opening their pores. The plants are keeping their pores shut. They have less pimples. There's stomata to let in air. When the stomata open, some of the water a plant contains evaporates. Since the stomata are less open frequently, they're also drawing less water into their roots. It's too hot for the water in the roots. The plant is becoming more efficient, but it's occurring at a price from a human perspective. Louis Ziska, a plant biologist at Columbia University, the price is steep. An additional 175 million people could suffer problems from zinc deficiency due to plunging nutrient levels. Guys, the food is going to shit because of how hot it is. They don't open their pores. It's all terrible for your food supply. You're going to die. Vegetables not doing great. We get this. How to ignite concern for climate change in boys, those little bastards who seem to be less interested in the environment. Studies suggest girls care more about the planet and climate change. One researcher suggests nurturing the ethic in boys and in all children starting as early as primary school. We all know that young people care about each other and nature, so get them then, right? Who is caring for the planet considered, why is caring for the planet considered unmanly? That's a question Joseph Henderson, a lecturer at the University of Vermont, my home state, has been grappling with recently. There's research suggesting that boys care less about the planet than girls, and that are less likely to take climate action. They're not going to take climate action, guys. They're missing out on the climate action. They need, you'd think action is like action. Boys like action movies. They like to move. Why can't they help out the environment? What research is there on men and boys' involvement in climate issues? There's a broad scholarly literature in both environmental sociology. Guys, get up to date with your environmental sociology. Very important. And political science on gender differences. What about gender differences? What are you talking about? There's gender differences. What's this scientist up to? Isn't this not allowed? Aren't we all the same? Can't you just cut your dick off and become a girl? Isn't that the answer here? Cut your dick off and you'll become more environmentally concerned. Obviously, it's just change it up, deal it up, change. The natural world in the context of climate change, right? What do we find out? Girls and young women tend to express greater concern about the issue. Oh, that's good for the girls. Why are boys and men in some cases reluctant to engage in environmentalism? Why? They work on petromasculinity. It's useful to think about here, as she knows how particular kinds of authoritarian masculinity are wrapped up in fossil fuel economies. That's what it is, guys. Your whole masculinity is wrapped up in fossil fuel economies. Kara Daggett figured it out. She figured it out. It's like all this war in Iran. It's all petromasculinity. That's all it is. It's some petromasculinity. You can see the phenomenon in action where certain kinds of men roll call on bicyclists and hybrid vehicles, or when political leaders use militaries to dominate other countries for oil. Oh, gosh. I once had a student tell me he would never drive an electric vehicle because that would be gay. What a jerk. In that moment, he was expressing a certain kind of male insecurity applied to automobile culture. Male insecurity is what made automobile culture, guys. All those guys trying to get laid, driving down Main Street in their cars, saying, "What's up?" They're just, it's insecurity, obviously. There's extreme examples, right? What can schools do to engage more men and boys in environmental issues? What can they do? This is what these people believe are going to get men interested over cars. Okay, this is going to beat out cars, right? What do we know, right? Pope Francis, what did he do? Our common home, yeah, maybe that'll work. Here's certainly some bright spots, kind of education, something. Nordic guys, what did they do? Nevertheless, first thing I'd advocate is just good general environmental education. So you need some education. We're back at that. Related to this, we need to rethink what we mean about school. A sad fact, school. Okay, so good education, but also rethink school. We know that place-based environmental and climate education is a key strategy so let them outside, I guess. Educators need to push back against high-stakes testing regimes so they can't test them. Okay, so then they'll be more friends with them, and that should help them buy the global warming thing because they won't be failing them for being retarded. Okay. As young people develop, it's imperative that educators engage them in learning experiences. We kind of talked about going outside. Finally, Recognize that many men feel economically and socially adrift right now, but aren't we talking about children? What? Okay. So that's their plan. We need to create educational programs that allow them to take responsibility for caring for. That's what they want. They want responsibility for caring on the earth. That'll fix it. There you go. We get this. Uh-oh, guys. Uh-oh. Bad news. Infamous disaster scenario can rapidly unfold, study finds. Oh, no. This is the climate disaster, the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. Guys, it's not going to work anymore. We're in big, big trouble. This can happen anytime. This is like the movie when everything freezes on Earth. Why Arizona, is in for an extra rainy summer. Guys, Arizona, you're going to get so much rain this summer in Arizona, according to the experts. The rain is coming to Arizona, guys. Summer officially starts in June, but according to AccuWeather, Arizona will have a wet and hot summer, even putting the state to a low, moderate risk of flooding. You're going to get floods in Arizona, guys. Here the experts say. And net zero was never designed for a world at war. No, it's not for war. What do you mean? It's not for war, right? And we got war. Look at this. Look at this kind of war. We got the dolphins are back, everybody. The dolphins, the armed laser dolphins are back. This is what we found out in the Wall Street Journal. Tehran says they could use previously unused weapons to attack U.S. warships, from submarines to mine-carrying dolphins. The dolphins are back. They haven't been seen since the Ukraine war began. Here's Mike Benz reminding us that Russian boosts dolphin patrols to protect Crimea naval base. We always forget that when these wars break out, the dolphin ranks are always, you worried about conscription in America the other day. They got conscription in Germany, right? What about the dolphins? Why don't they have a say in any of this stuff? They just keep getting their asses conscripted into war. Every war that breaks out, the dolphin divisions come in. And now, of course, the dolphins have showed up in the Strait of Hormuz. We've got dolphins. We've got lasers. It's all happening. Here they are talking about it on CNN. We got the dolphins and the lasers. Big, big news, guys. And make sure the audio is coming through. Did I see the new Corvette C10 badass? I will take a look at that in 1 second because I like Corvettes. Here's old Caitlin Collins with the dolphin story. Here it is, the dolphin story. Low to no sound, you're telling me. It makes no sense. Hold on. Window. I see what happened. Just a second here, guys. No, that's not what I want. No. What's going on? No, none of those. There we go. It's all backwards for some reason. Don't know why it all got backwards, but here, you got to hear the dolphin sound. It'd just be me, better ask around. No, it was you. I got multiple comments.
Have them go dark and still deliver that oil to China. I mean, there's a physical blockade. They literally cannot do that right now.
This is a physical blockade. They're not able to send their oil and the resources to China, and a vast majority of their oil exports were going via sea to give you a sign of the desperate measures they're contemplating, the Wall Street Journal reported today that they're contemplating measures like suicide dolphins, dolphins equipped with mines to try to go after U.S. ships. So that's not a measure which projects real strength.
Dolphins.
Wait, I'm sorry. You have to. How would that even work?
The dolphins are back.
Discussed in the past by the Iranian regime that
they want to strap bombs to dolphins.
To dolphins with mines to go after U.S. ships. Now that's a pretty crazy asymmetric tool, but this is some of the measures that are being reported right now.
I mean, do you think that they could actually try? If they actually tried that, what would that say about their desperation?
Well,
every
this
war.
Is something that they've thrown out in the past to show the various options they have at their disposal. But again, this is not a show of a country which is strong. You don't contemplate those kinds of measures when.
Wow, come on, Russia did it too. We got the dolphins in the game. So indeed, we had a big announcement yesterday called Project Freedom, and that is Trump saying that there's going to be some form of escorts through the Strait of Hormuz using the U.S. military. It hasn't exactly worked out the way they're describing so far. Here's Sal Mercogliano giving an update on what it is. And this is how it was announced by U.S. Central Command. U.S. military supports launch of Project Freedom in the Strait of Hormuz. So here they say that they're going to help navigate, but it turns out it's not exactly that. They're not going to escort. So here's what we know. Sal Mercogliano, it says they've announced that it will guide ships. So that means they'll help them, through radio and stuff like that. I don't think it just passes through them with the ships. Announced they will restore freedom of navigation for commercial shipping throughout the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM announced the use of Burke-class destroyers, over 100 land and sea-based aircraft, and 15,000 personnel. The head of the National Security Commission for the Iranian parliament noted that any interference in the Strait will be considered a violation of the ceasefire. So, and here's a little more of what it looks like from OSINT Technical, saying the Trump announced U.S. mission to guide ships out of the Persian Gulf will not involve U.S. Navy escorts. The U.S. instead will instruct ships on safe avenues of passage through the Strait of Hormuz and coordinate with shipping and insurance. So as of this morning, we hear that a few ships have made it through. The Iranians are claiming that they have struck a ship. The Americans are denying anything like that has happened. We don't really have any credible video or anything like that right now. But I continue to believe that what we're seeing here is a kind of a trap, I guess you could say. Trump and the Americans, I don't think, want the Strait of Hormuz to just open cleanly like that. It looks more and more like it's a sort of legal move on the part of Trump. So war powers formally ended hostility the other day. And we see that this project announced as a humanitarian effort, if you see here from the comments from Mercogliano, indeed, it is supposed to be for humanitarian purposes here. It's a humanitarian gesture to free ships and crew, all those ships that are trapped in there. A few American ships have already made it out, as I said. But what you really can do here is if they are fired upon, the American ships, then it's not America that's breaking the ceasefire, and they will begin to attack Iran again. So it looks like it'll be them starting the new conflict if this is what happens. And he won't need any new war powers in order to engage in this. So not positive, but that's sort of what it looks like to me. Now, again, I always take Trump's own body language when it comes to these stories. I always take what Trump is saying and doing as a big indication. And if you saw Trump this weekend, he was at his villages. It's one of his big support centers in Florida, in the middle of Florida. It's the place where all the seniors get a little, I don't know. They have fun, I guess. It's like the STD capital of old people in the world, something like that. So here's Trump, and it's always been a huge power base of Trump, this part of Florida, Central Florida. Here's Trump speaking in a huge crowd over the weekend. He was there Friday night, and really loose and comedic. This was one of his most stand-up comedy-esque type addresses you've seen in a long time. This is really Trump doing his stand-up comedy routine. And a lot of fun stuff. So I will play and make sure the audio comes through correctly. Why is everything backwards on this? This is really strange. Normally I get the tab that I have at the top, near the top, and today it's completely not that. So just give me a second. And they're not in the same order that I left them at all. I don't quite understand why. Clash report is what I'm looking for. Just don't even see it. There it is. So again, I tend to take Trump's body language and all of that stuff as I mean, you hate having to read body language, but again, when I see him not stressed, I tend to think that this is where things are at.
They have no radar. They have no leaders. Actually, their leaders are all gone too. It's part of our problem. We don't know who the hell we're dealing with. They call up, this is Mohammed so-and-so, and I say, are you a leader? We're looking for a leader. It's the only country in the world, nobody wants to be a leader. You know, they say, would anybody like to be president? And there are no takers. They have no radar. They have no leaders.
So the situation there, I mean, it looks like a really important 48 hours to determine what's next and determine where things head. To me, it looks like the next 48 hours will confirm that the United States has as much control as they need over the strait, and that we'll understand way more about this war, as we have done every morning on this show, analyzing what's going on, not by the hot war in the Strait of Hormuz, but how finances are flowing, who's complaining, who's crying, who's really suffering. And again, I keep underlying that the Chinese have had many opportunities until now to make some form of disagreement, to escalate things, the Russians as well. We've seen neither of those things happen. The only people that cry about Iran are the Iranians and the Europeans. And as we've been analyzing for some time, the Europeans are the folks that are not getting their oil. Of course, we've seen Trump allow Iranians send oil to China and to make sure that all of the customers that aren't Europe are getting their supply from the shadow fleet. America rarely interdicts one of these shadow fleet ships, and they do it all around the world when they do, so they don't even bother with the Strait of Hormuz. They'll just go take them in the Pacific, or they'll take them here or there. So again, looking at who's complaining loudly about the war in Iran is generally an indication of who's losing, and who we see losing, as far as I can tell, remains the Europeans. Macron the other day saying exactly that. He said, we should not underestimate. This is a unique moment where a US president, a Russian president, and a Chinese president are dead against the Europeans. We should not estimate this, and that this is a big sign. Tom Luongo, who will be on this show on Friday, by the way, so everyone get your calendars ready. I'll be sitting down here in the morning with Tom Luongo, who's seeing things very similar to me, but I want to share his point of view with all of you all, and that'll be on Friday at around 10 a.m. Eastern. I should have Tom for about the full hour, and we should have a lot of fun. We should not underestimate, he says, that this is a moment centuries in the making, because Europeans never thought the Americans, Russians, and Chinese were capable of throwing off the shackles of their colonial masters. This has been the frame we've been taking here, that America, with the Federal Reserve, had fallen under the hypnosis, under the spell of this European system. And here we are in this conjured up system. And that's exactly what's breaking. Whoops, I don't know why. I will be playing this audio in 1 second. But indeed, when we continue to analyze this, follow the money, follow the incentives, follow who's crying. And when you see Trump and Putin, for example, on the same page, which they said they were according to Ukraine, you're already seeing this stuff change drastically. Here, I will show you one of the developments that we got just before I get started on what's going on with Russia, Ukraine, and all of that as it's related. Let me see where it is. Yeah, I will pull this one up. And we can see already the United States war budget bill for 2027 will not include aid to Ukraine. You're already hearing about all the American ships leaving, or the American soldiers leaving Germany. It's only getting bigger. So we're seeing, just like Tom Luongo is suggesting here, we should not underestimate that this moment is centuries in the making. So this is a huge moment that's happening. And limiting everything to like how much is going on in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran, is just so short-sighted for what's really going on. And you have to look at these financial flows. You have to look at who's crying, what's really changing, who's losing. But Iran is not really one of the belligerents in this. This is much larger and much bigger. Promethean Action here has a really good take on just how historic all of these changes are, and that the OPEC question and the UAE question that we saw last week and this new petrodollar piece has really been one of the main frames that you've heard for years on this show, that we're seeing a complete and total realignment of the economic system that comes with propaganda changing, that comes with all these institutions changing. And here is Susan Kokinda describing these changes, I think, in really accurate detail.
Here's what the end of that relationship looks like economically. This week, the United Arab Emirates left OPEC. And the president had this to say about it.
I mean, I think it's great. I know him very well, Mohammed, and very smart. And he probably maybe wants to go his own way. That's a good thing. I think ultimately it's a good thing for getting the price of gas down, getting oil down, getting everything down. They have it all. He's a great leader, actually. So no, I'm okay. They're having some problems in OPEC.
They're having some problems in OPEC. To understand why that is the understatement of the last 50 years, you actually have to understand what OPEC is and who built the system on top of it. Because this goes back to 1971, when the British orchestrated the attack on the US dollar that forced Nixon to end the Breton Woods system, take the dollar off the gold reserve standard, and let it flow. What did that really mean? It meant that the dollar was no longer sovereign, and it could become a plaything for the global financier elite. And from that point on, money and resource flows were configured outside the United States to feed the imperial game at the expense of our economy and our national economic development. And the same was true for other countries as well. OPEC was part of that. It was a monopoly set up under the guidance of the City of London to manipulate supply and prices. Henry Kissinger then set up the petrodollar system, organizing the OPEC nations to conduct their business only in dollars. Those dollars then fed the offshore dollar market, controlled by the City of London, and used to turn the world economy into one big giant casino. To the extent that physical production was allowed, it took place only to feed the speculative bubble. And Henry Kissinger was pretty candid about who he was building that system for. In 1982, he went to that same Chatham House and he said, "In my White House incarnation then, I kept the British Foreign Office better informed and more closely engaged than I did the American State Department." Now, did you notice that when King Charles spoke to Congress, he invoked Henry Kissinger by name?
And that alliance is part of what Henry Kissinger described as Kennedy's soaring vision of an Atlantic partnership based on twin pillars, Europe and America. That partnership, I believe, Mr. Speaker, is more important today than it has ever been.
He was right. It was Kissinger's vision. The king just left out the fact that Kissinger was keeping the British better informed than his own government while he was doing it. And this is what makes the UAE's exit so significant. OPEC was one of the structures through which the empire worked. The Iranian regime, with its control of the Straits and its support for Islamic terrorism, was another part of the business model. The whole architecture depended on Gulf instability as the enforcement mechanism. Iran and the Strait of Hormuz were the empire's on-off switch, and every manufactured crisis drove the oil prices up, kept the petrodollars flowing, and kept London in the center of the action. Trump is taking those levers away. And with that threat off the board, the UAE is walking out of the cartel built to manage production caps and oil prices. Now, here's another element of Trump's redistricting the world: the never-ending conflict between Israel and its neighbors. And Trump's change started with the Abraham Accords, and it now includes this. The UAE, which has suffered more missile attacks from Iran than Israel, has been protected by the Israeli Iron Dome batteries and IDF sources deployed on UAE soil for the first time. So the imperial...
So what did I say the first day of this war with Iran? That the Abraham Accords holding was the biggest story. That's the biggest story. And not only the Abraham Accords holding, the old systems, the Abraham Accords were meant to disintermediate and relieve, those ones are falling apart like OPEC. So you're seeing the Abraham Accords and the commercial relationships that come from it superseding the old petrodollar gaming of the system relationships that we're seeing out there. So, and it's even more obvious. I mean, I'm going to come back to Susan Kokinda in 1 second, but when she was talking about gambling and how that created the system that we now live in the United States, Warren Buffett gave one of his last, he can't even do the address, but his thing was last week. And then they have the new CEO of Berkshire Hathaway there. And Warren Buffett ends up still doing a CNBC interview, sit-down interview with what's her name from Squawk Box. And here he describes exactly the same situation that Susan Kokinda is talking about. Here he says the US market has become a casino. And Susan Kokinda is saying it became a casino because of all of the games that went on, the Triffin dilemma, the manipulation of the currency that happened abroad. Warren Buffett does nothing to put it in that context. He just talks about it like a choice, but that's where Warren Buffett, I think, gets it wrong. But he is in agreement with seeing the market as a casino
to do. And then the question is to find one that makes sense. And there may be 20 out there that make sense that you don't understand, and you just leave them alone.
You said that the world or the surrounding environment is not ideal, and I guess that points to the idea that there's almost $400 billion in cash on hand, although Greg took some pains to show it's really more like $380 billion in cash on hand.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of cash on hand, and you're still active in managing the portfolio, too, and looking at stocks. You're looking around, and you don't see a lot that you want to invest in.
No. Well, then we don't do anything. I mean, we've been in of the 60 years I've been in the business, there's probably 5 of them have been really juicy, and I think it was Tom Watson Sr. of IBM that said, they asked him the reason why IBM had been so successful or something like that, and he said, I'm smart at spots and I stay around those spots. And that's the whole thing. And IBM was in 3 different businesses, including time clocks and a couple of, and 2 of the 3 turned out to be no good, but so they just focused on the one.
What is it when you look around that it's just prices are too high at this point? I would imagine there are, Greg said this from the stage too, there are businesses that you like, just not these prices.
And I would say I understand fewer of the businesses as a percentage of the whole than I did 10 years ago. I have not learned new industries for some years, and so I don't kid myself on that. I'm not going to learn them. I'm not going to have an edge on, a whole bunch of younger people that have actually grown up with them, used the product, seen things. But it, well, as I mentioned, you don't have to understand too many if they're like Apple.
But looking around, let's just get some macro thoughts on this, because I don't know that this is something that Greg is going to comment on per se. Just looking at the macro stock market environment. What does this feel like to you? Does it feel expensive? Does it feel like there are opportunities in some places?
Well, it feels like, I've compared the markets to a church with a casino attached. And people can move between the church and casino. And I would say there are more people in the church and more people in the casino. But the casino's gotten very attractive to people. If you're buying one-day options or selling them, I mean, that is, that's not investing, it's not speculating, it's gambling, just totally. There's nobody that can explain why they're buying an option for one day, unless they maybe the fellow that made the $400 and some $1,000 from knowing when we were going into Venezuela can do it. But I mean, that's really, and the quantity of those things is just incredible. So we've never had people in a more gambling mood than now, but that doesn't mean.
So because we've lived this entire era in this gambling mood with this City of London system, with this choke point on the Hormuz, with UAE and OPEC manipulating markets, with China manipulating markets, with this entire system that was created that is being destroyed before our eyes in Iran right now, we're seeing something else come to life, right? It's why you see Saylor here saying that Bitcoin is likely American just because of these the signature that we see here, Saylor with G Money, talking about all of the history of this kind of development and where it comes from.
It seems pretty clear to me that that Satoshi is American technologist. I think it came from America, but I don't really think it's all that constructive to try to figure out who it was. I think it's better just to note that it was a very talented engineer or group of engineers working together under pseudonym. It seems pretty clear to me that.
And that's why, going back to Susan Kokinda, we see here that in the same interview that Hegseth gave the other day, when Hegseth was talking about power projection and running Bitcoin nodes and how basically soft war is a real theory that they're following. Here, as we're destroying and dismantling this old system, we're hearing Hegseth mention a new, basically an investment bank run out of the US military.
Imperial binary that kept Arab countries and Israel at each other's throats for decades, permanently dependent on outside management, noticed it. The headlines about Secretary of War Hegseth's testimony before the House Armed Services Committee focused on the fireworks about the conflict in Iran and the size of the defense
and the Bitcoin node running and power projection
budget. But here's what those headlines missed: the creation of the Office of Strategic Capital, an investment bank inside the Department of War. Here's the official statement. The Office of Strategic Capital has been established as the Department of War's internal investment bank, a novel and powerful tool for revitalizing the national security industrial base. The OSC wields approximately $210 billion in lending authority. This capital is instrumental in supporting the national security supply chain, providing the financial resources necessary for companies to scale production, invest in research and development, and modernize their facilities. This direct financial intervention helps to de-risk investment in the defense sector and ensures that critical industries have the capital they need to thrive. De-risk investment. This is similar to what President Trump said on April 20th in a series of executive orders and findings on energy, where he made clear that markets had failed to ensure our economic security. Hegseth has set up a facility to address that. That's what de-risking means. Now, this was completely ignored by both Congress and the press. but it's one of the most significant institutional developments in American economic policy in 50 years. Since the end of Breton Woods, capital has been hijacked by the speculators, and the real economy and our national security has paid the price. The Office of Strategic Capital addresses that. It's not going to wait for Wall Street to decide whether a munitions plant or a rare earth processor will yield a quarterly return. It identifies what America needs, funds it directly, and uses that to bring private capital alongside. This is Hamilton's American system. This is what FDR used to build the arsenal of democracy. This is what the British imperial financial system has spent 80 years trying to prevent America from ever doing again. And it's happening now, simultaneous with a ceasefire in Ukraine, a cracking OPEC. These institutions are being created to rebuild our energy and economic independence. So King Charles came to Washington last week to try to talk the U.S. back into their system. President Trump smiled and toasted. And in the meantime, he was reshaping the strategic and economic landscape of the world. Because what you watch this week is the acceleration of that system's undoing. A ceasefire call that aligns Washington and Moscow against the empire's war machine, a UAE withdrawal that cracks the Kissinger petrodollar trap, and a new American investment bank pulling government credit back into productive industry. Donald Trump is redistricting the world, and this time it's America that's drawing the lines. Promethean action.
So, you look at that and you see, what can China do? Where else is all this energy going, right? That's the way to interpret this, is we can see through some of the cracks to understand incentives to watch the flow of capital. Now, if you're going to predict where this is headed, if you're going to predict where Iran and the only people crying still are, of course, the Iranians, but also the Europeans. China's not crying. Russia's not crying. They're aligning with America. Are they doing anything else that could possibly railroad or divert where all of this energy seems to be headed? If China, Russia, and America seem to be aligned, what else could do it? It's not China's own financial system that they're pushing. Here's James E. Thorne talking about it, saying, food for thought. China wants to get tough, then float the yuan and open the capital account. China's new order telling firms to ignore U.S. sanctions around sounds like a strategic turning point, but it's really a loud flourish on top of a deeply cautious financial regime. Beijing is willing to manufacture a legal clash with Washington over a handful of refiners and Iran oil flows, but it is absolutely unwilling to take the one step that would prove real confidence, floating the yuan and lifting capital controls. The gap between swagger and structure is the story. On the surface, China is playing tough by declaring U.S. sanctions illegitimate and instructing its companies to treat American law as a foreign nuisance. Beneath the surface, the system still rests on a tightly managed exchange rate, strict controls on cross-border flows, and a party-directed banking sector designed to contain panic and suppress market verdicts. True monetary sovereignty, exposing the currency and capital account to global decline, would mean accepting the risk of sudden stops, capital flight, and a genuine market price for Chinese risk. That is a step Xi's China will not take. The result is an asymmetry. Beijing talks like a revisionist power, but behaves in monetary terms like a highly defensive one. It is not building an open alternative to the dollar system. It is building a walled-off subsystem that can root around U.S. pressure in specific corridors while keeping domestic savers and capital locked inside. That combination, muscular rhetoric at the frontier, financial caution at home, is precisely why U.S. sanctions are being eroded at the edges instead of being confronted head-on, and why the contest over financial hegemony will be grinding structural competition rather than a single decisive break. So it looks like that's what's happening, and it looks like there's people seeing the swap line as exactly what I said. This is a completely new economic order, and it's why I told you from the very beginning. Remember, I said I don't give a shit if stablecoins can't pay yield to American users. It's a very stupid idea, because if you're going to weaponize the dollar, then paying yield in America but not abroad, or paying yield in America and abroad, doesn't really get you there. If the point of the stablecoin and Genius and everything that's coming from Clarity is really to dollarize the rest of the world, which is what you've seen here. It's about a new system. What I've been saying from pretty much last summer coherently, when I spoke with Francis Pouliot at the Bitcoin meetup in Montreal last year, we talked about fiat currencies and what this new order is going to look like, what bimetallism with Bitcoin and the US dollar stablecoin regime looks like. And Francis put it in a way that I've since copied. He said basically every country was allowed in this Breton Woods system, the previous one, and this UAE inside of OPEC and London City and Kissinger's petrodollar. What it really did was everyone was allowed to have their own fiat Ponzi, but their fiat Ponzi had to plug into the American system so that we had the guaranteed buyers of the US government debt in the name of the other foreign central banks who were trying to get US dollars in order to pay for their oil bill. Now, with what we're seeing with this re-architecture is that basically Trump is telling everyone who had a fiat Ponzi, you're not allowed to run a fiat Ponzi. We're going to go direct to consumer. We're going to go directly to foreigners and provide a situation and incentives where they will dollarize their own economy. And this note here went very viral over the weekend from 10 Delta, describing exactly what you've heard on this show for well over a year now. This is a mix of what I've been saying and what Francis has been saying and what lots of folks out there are saying. Clarity Act is now poised to accelerate the Breton Woods 3.0 framework that I've talked about. The yield ban is cosmetic and simply something for banks to tout as a victory. It bans stablecoins from paying you interest or just holding them, the way a savings account does, but it explicitly allows stablecoins to pay you rewards for using them, buying things. I told you it was going to be consumer money. Of course, it's going to be consumer money. It's exactly what it's going to be, consumer money. Buying things, lending, providing liquidity, participating in any program. Now, consider that those rewards can be calculated based on how much you hold and for how long. I think that's what we call interest, but it will be rebranded under a new name. So the implications, the fact that there are now a carve out for stablecoin yield will accelerate the Breton Woods 3.0 system. If the ban had been real, no yield in any form, there's no reason for anyone to hold stablecoins over a bank account. Stablecoin adoption would flatline, especially in developed markets, and Besant's 3.7 trillion target would be hard to achieve. The carve-out keeps the incentive to hold stablecoins, which keeps the growth flywheel spinning. CBDCs can't compete. No central bank would design its own digital currency to pay actively based on rewards calculated by balance and duration too close to monetary policy. However, dollar stablecoins can. So in every market where a CBDC competes against a dollar stablecoin, the dollar product is economically superior. The Clarity Act now guarantees that advantage persists. The dollar now goes global without permission. That's exactly what I've been saying, is that it's a weaponization of the US dollar to go global. The new text allows platforms to pay incentives for payments, remittances, and settlement activity using stablecoins. That's a subsidy for global dollar adoption while funded by private companies. Exactly what I said was going to happen. Exactly, precisely what I said. Meanwhile, increasing treasury demand in the background. For example, a Filipino worker now gets a rebate for sending remittances in USDC. There's an additional incentive for how to now transact in stablecoins, which, unbeknownst to him, purchases American debt behind the scenes. Exactly. A win-win for global stablecoin users and the American economy fiscal situation. The compromise looks like a ban, but it's actually a growth mandate. As I've stated, the US government needs stablecoins to scale because it needs someone to buy its debt. Breton Woods 3.0. Santiago Capital saying here, the best way to think about USD swap lines, which is what they did for UAE to get them to leave OPEC the same day. It happened the same day, right? Swap lines is they basically transform the recipient into a new regional branch of the Federal Reserve or US Treasury, more like US Treasury. The Federal Reserve is being injected into the Treasury. So that'll be the end of that. But a new branch doesn't have any voting rights with regards to monetary policy. Exactly. And that's why with Clarity Act coming, you're going to see, here's James E. Thorne saying it again, China not serious here, BRICS falling apart. Here, James E. Thorne saying Wall Street is sleepwalking past the biggest new carry trade in decades. Capital is starting to move from low-yield, risk-free Fed funds into high-yield, Bitcoin-linked instruments such as STRC. where on-chain returns sit an order of magnitude higher. The spread is not a quirky crypto anomaly. It is the birth of parallel risk-free curve in a tokenized system. With the Clarity Act set to codify U.S. digital asset market structure and remove the main regulatory alibi for inaction, institutional credit will not stay parked in the analog system forever. At scale, this will look like a niche crypto trade and look less like a niche crypto trade and more like a yen carry trade on steroids. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And people talking about Susan Kokinda, a little cautious because of all the sudden attention on her. Thanks for sharing, but that's true, an honest gem of content. Oh yeah, sorry, barely 45 shared a link to Rug Pull Radio with a special guest Michael Saylor. So thanks for that. That's in the live chat, indeed. I think she was the first person I saw draw a line between Lloyd's of London, MI6, Iranian regime, and the Hormuz scam, and she gets a lot of credit for that. Yeah, exactly. Their view counts on YouTube seem stable for what it's worth. I think they're growing pretty naturally. Promethean, and I've got people looking into it. So I never let that stuff go. Indeed, when I see people pop up on the scene, I look into their background. So I've got people on the ground, I think, but so far they haven't uncovered anything, and I've had people on them for quite a while now. So far so good. Barely 45 reminds us Promethean Action was all in on the COVID hoax. However, so their information among other information and nothing more. I mean, a lot of, you can't, early on COVID folks, you got to realize the amount of things hadn't really split in the Bitcoin binaries that we're seeing today. We hadn't seen these other events really force everyone's hand. It was only when I really saw the voting stuff come through that I fully believed COVID was a hoax. I didn't have it fully figured out until like June of 2020, when the George Floyd stuff was going on and all that. I mean, I was not afraid of COVID. I was not locked down like we all, but it was a real virus. I mean, I saw the dead bodies in New York City. Something was going around. I even had the bad luck of being in one of the great big cemeteries in the month of April in New York City when the real 2-week lockdown was happening. And because I never locked down, I just kept living my life. And my family had COVID in January, and by then we already knew, and I had already seen confirmed with my own eyes that children didn't get it as bad because my kids got it. I was worried about them getting it. We all knew about COVID in New York in January, 100%. If you remember, you were racist if you didn't go to Chinatown in January 2020. It was already the talk of the town. If you were sniffling and coughing on the subway in January in New York City of 2020, you were in a fight. You had to stay home. I didn't go into the city for a few days. I stayed in Brooklyn back then because I did have COVID. It was a terrible illness. And it's why I traveled with my family during COVID. When the first case was in Barcelona, I was in Barcelona. I had to flee Barcelona. I fled Paris as Paris got shut down. I made it back to New York for New York to get shut down. But by then I'd already been through multiple shutdowns, and I'd already been through the ringer and all that stuff. And as we said, we knew by then it wasn't fatal. Already by March, we knew it wasn't fatal to children, and that the symptoms were less in children. And we knew it wasn't fatal to, we could already understand the obesity issues were at play. And so when it came to New York, I was basically not afraid of COVID because I already believed I had immunity. And I was going outside every day, right? I'd go outside every day. I wasn't going into public spaces. I wasn't going shopping at grocery stores. Most of them were closed, so you couldn't anyway. But I took my kids out every day. We often just went to the beach. We often drove out to the ocean, or we'd go into the city. because there were no parking rules or anything. And I had a community garden that I had access to, so a few acres right in Brooklyn, 1 block away from me, and that I'd use all the time. But one day we decided to go to a cemetery because the cemeteries were in full bloom because they have some of the most cherry blossoms in the whole city. And so we went out to the cherry blossoms, and it just so happened to be the day they were burning bodies. And I'm telling you, the amount of holes I saw dug and the amount of smoke coming out of that where they incinerate people, where they cremate people was, I'll never forget the smell. I'll never forget the piles. I'll never forget any of that stuff. So that all really did happen. And, even on my own street, neighbors, the worst thing in New York were the, let's say, 8-unit corner buildings, right? With like 4 floors and 2 sides and a couple places. They're all sharing air. People died like crazy in those buildings, right? If you were an obese person living in one of these buildings, you're toast, man. Bodies everywhere, right? So with they probably have the same taken COVID if I was an old lady at the time. Exactly. Yeah. The narrative hoax was COVID. That is, yeah. Exactly. I mean, they definitely did unleash a virus on us. That happened. Probably less fatal than they were hoping, but fatal enough that we had a lot of trouble. So I could see why old ladies would fall for that, right? They're better on this file than they were on COVID. And look, again, I'm still and was a big Scott Adams fan, and we found out that he was definitely gaming the system on the early COVID times, trying to make sure that people reacted, and then he was using his powers for that. And that's something we know now, and I forgive him for that. He believed it, right? I don't think he was out lying to you about COVID. I think in the first few months he 100% believed it. So anyway, the whole point here with James E. Thorne is that the financial systems, you've got to be able to track these financial systems and these financial incentives. And this tells the true story of what's going on, I think, in Iran. And I think as Bitcoiners, if you follow the money, you'll understand much better about what's going on. And even this, if it was so sure that Iran was doing great, right? Why are 11 million Iranians holding Bitcoin, according to Reuters, right? 10% of the population. And this is what the world has in store. This is why I continue to predict that in no time, Iran and America are going to be huge allies, and that they're going to be a big part of peace going forward, because they're no longer a button that England and the UK can pull. And other groups are growing as NATO is shrinking. We're seeing here the POTO, the Pacific Ocean Treaty Organization, with us, Japan, Korea, Philippines, Vietnam. You're seeing new structures put in place, and all of that secured. And the old ones are dying. I mean, EU back into its trade war with the United States. Again, just look at who America is really attacking and being strict with and difficult with. Is it Iran? I don't think so. Is it China? I mean, competitively, sure. Is it Russia? Nope. The worst of the group losing the most, just as Macron said, is the UK and Europe. And here Trump comes out again. 9 months, 0 EU compliance. Trump was right to restore auto tariffs on the Europeans. Trump negotiated a fair deal with the EU last year, cutting tariffs at 15% in August. 8 months later, and the EU has done nothing but Trump-proof the deal. And they haven't honored a single commitment. Trump was right to restore tariffs. So Trump is going to continue to go after them, and you're going to continue to see this to become a major story. And why this European conflict? Because again, go back to where we were, heard from Warren Buffett and what we heard from Susan Kokinda, that the market, as Warren Buffett said, has been turned into either casino or church. And the gambling attitude, this whole, we're going to YOLO into this and YOLO into that. Gambling on the future is not the same as actually investing in the future. That's the difference. The church side are people investing in the future. And what we saw there from all of this strategic office for investments from the Department of Defense, and what we saw from all of this Clarity Act and Genius and Michael Saylor talking about this entire change for where people put their yield-bearing investments, where this bond market looks like it's not going to make it compared to what STRC is doing, and we start to see this real Breton Woods bimetallism, Bitcoin, and all fiat Ponzi's being rolled into the US dollar, where we see this new system really coming clear. Is, again, that's not a gambling thing. Europe is betting on new taxes and censorship as their means of consolidating their financial system. You see here the Dutch going back to the drawing board with their unrealized cap gains tax, doing their best. Here's Seiko describing it from a Dutch perspective. Box 3 update as of May 4th. The memorandum in response to the report has answers to parliamentary questions. So this is all just more about how they're going to close the noose on the Dutch rich people. And they released this report too: wealth taxation, including net wealth, capital, and exit taxes. This is like one of those calibrations of what can we get the most of by taking people's money. The opposite of what you heard from Exit and the system Trump is creating. This Hamiltonian system that we heard goes back to this, again, what we heard from Warren Buffett, this church versus the casino question that he was saying, that Wall Street is essentially a church and a casino, and that people go back and forth between them. But that's what's getting ended here. That's what's getting destroyed by this new Hamiltonian system that is a lot more like National Socialism, if you will, right? What we have here in Quebec, I know one of the conversations I had with Curtis Yarvin when I was sitting down with him in Las Vegas was exactly that. He said, I was telling him why I like Quebec and why I think Quebec is, got a real chance. And I said, well, Quebec has never really been socialist. It's more fascist. And by fascist, I mean it invests in businesses that will be good for Quebec. That's why the the power and energy stuff is so well taken care of. Not the healthcare. Quebec doesn't care about healthcare like Canada, though. We have plenty of private healthcare here. We're nothing like Canada. Bans private healthcare. Quebec has, for the last 20-something years, most of my life, allowed for private healthcare without much of a fuss. So Quebec invests in the main industry that is good for its people, energy. And yeah, taxes are high, but they can come down. It's mostly to pay for some white collar workers. But when I go to most restaurants and even McDonald's and Starbucks and all that in the countryside here, it's all local kids that still work there. It's all the things that Americans and MAGA want to recultivate in America, but that's already here. We're a little ahead on that stuff. So when you look at this tax calibration and what Europe is offering, you're getting more to the gambling stage, because with how bad things are, expecting that they can still raise taxes and that they can use their censorship to get to where they want to manipulate politics, to me sounds like gambling. It sounds like the gambling has infected their political mind as well, because there's nothing in the world of reality that says this is going to work. Citizen X here, Katie, saying the European Commission literally just dropped a research on how to collect more taxes without making you angry enough to leave. And don't forget, that's Katie the Russian, as we used to know her before the war. Higher health taxes, inheritance taxes, plus exit tax coming. And this weekend they had a really funny moment. They started to try to embrace freedom of speech. Kaja Kallas comes out. A free press is essential to democracy, she says. Across the world, journalists are threatened, forced into exile, detained or killed doing their job, as we have seen in Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and the conflicts in the Middle East and Africa. Disinformation and intimidation continue to undermine independent journalism. The EU will continue to defend free press. So censorship is defending free press, they say. Mike Benz points out, notice how the second paragraph, it says disinformation undermines the public's right to know, framing their censorship atrocities as simply protecting fragile minds from accidentally knowing things they shouldn't know. And it's not going to work. Here's the other one. Free press. This is a big study they came out with. No democracy without media freedom. The European Parliament stands firm in defending free speech, protecting journalists, and acting to uphold the media freedom. Mike Benz says, Every one of the tens of thousands of people facing charges for their speech in Europe should print this on a t-shirt and wear it to their criminal trials, which is a good point. Preston Byrne here laughing. They put out this note as well. Let the truth be told. Let the press be free. Journalists hold power to account, uncover justice, and keep citizens informed, often at great personal risk. Let the truth be told. Let the press be free. And Preston Byrne saying, cool. Can the press insult the German chancellor in crass terms without fear of arrest? No, they can't. Here's Lena Seish. Many people commenting on this same comment here. She works in El Salvador and does a lot of messaging for Bukele. She's one of the Bitcoiners that went and took refuge in El Salvador. She's a German. She says, it's hard to believe now, but not too many years ago, the EU quite successfully sold itself as an advocate for the rights of its people, and an EU condemnation held political weight on the other side of the planet. Today, the free world knows that when the EU says free speech, they mean approved speech. When they say press freedom, they mean press obedience. And when they say human rights, they mean they love criminals. The speed in which the UN became a parody of itself is nothing short of extraordinary and tragic. I think it's mostly funny, and we like the funniness. Here's Mike Benz showing you that they're going to try and uptalk this blue sky thing because that's their plan. So you're seeing it in advance. That's the good news here. The architecture of deceit by people like Mike Benz have been so thoroughly exposed, but you can see it even more and more when these examples come out and you get folks, let me find this one, like Mike Benz, describing exactly what is going on with these sludge people.
Notice Brazil banned X in 2024, but it didn't ban Instagram. That's because this is what the average Brazilian woman looks like, okay? You can't ban Instagram in Brazil or there'd be a fucking civil war in 5 fucking minutes. They have 2 ways of communicating, WhatsApp and Instagram. There's no Instagram alternative. Everyone just posts themselves half naked, and that's their way of doing a life update. Hey, I went to the dentist today. Here's me in a bikini. Hey, I'm walking my dog. Have you seen my torso yet today? Look, there's a wildfire that just broke out in the Amazon. Here's my cute sister. Like, that's just the way news is in Brazil. So you can't ban Instagram. There's no alternative. I guess the hottie Brazilian baddie thotties in Brazil just aren't on Mastodon, and they aren't listening to this constipated lesbian in Brazil saying, no, put your bikini pics on Mastodon. But once they have this in place, once they have Eurosky, their Skynet, Eurosky, Europe aims to rival big tech with its own social media ecosystem. Once they get everybody there, then they can crank up the fines on X and try to dare X into abandoning the European market because they already have the alternative in place. They can't do it until then.
Yeah. No one wants to hang out with poor people in Europe on Blue Sky. No one wants to hang out with fucking Europeans on Twitter in the first place. What are they going to go create an environment in the UK for this kind of stuff? And in Europe, it's not going to work. Just not going to work. And the good news is, wait, that's not what I wanted. Where did that happen? I need to find this guy's thing. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. The good news is all of their censorship, and this is why it's gambling, right? This is why they think that the fake, we're not going to tax you, and then they come and go after the unrealized cap gains tax, while they're going after the exit taxes, the wealth taxes, and why they need censorship instead of free speech in order to keep everything static and in place so that they can tighten the noose. Why it's not going to work is simply because, again, go back to what we saw from Trump, what we've seen in the marketplace on X and all these ideas and the humor and the entertainment and everything we're seeing out there to draw attention to this stuff is just so much more powerful than the censorship and the finger wagging and the nagging by these women, and why it just doesn't hold any sway and is just not persuasive. Kaja Kallas is not persuasive. Von der Leyen is not persuasive, and nothing they're doing is adding to their lack of individual persuasiveness. They're not creating interesting viral memes. They're not creating any collateral on the internet that's changing people's minds. They're just losing more and more people. And as we've seen it modeled in America, it's now infecting Europe, these new ways of communicating, these new ways of strategizing. We saw, of course, from, Mamdani is the only one on the left that's had any ability to do it. And he was successful, but we haven't seen anything like that come from Europe. And they're just going back with the censorship thing. So I doubt anything like that is coming. But Reform is already coming up with its own ideas in UK, and the UK election that might come soon with Keir Starmer's weakness is starting to show signs. Of course, there's Reform, and then there's what's the other one? There's two big ones. It's Nigel Farage's, I think that's Reform. And then the other one in the UK is, I don't know, Reclaim or something. But here is one of Nigel Farage's guys giving his strategy, and it's hilarious. And this stuff is way more effective than their censorship bans.
This is Zach Polanski, aka the Breast Whisperer.
Look at this.
I came to you and said, can you make my breast bigger through hypnotherapy? And you said, yes.
But mind over memory is just one of Zach's many mad ideas. As illegal migrants continue to turn up on our shores, Zach and his Green Party say they want Britain to have no borders at all. Now it's clear that the failed Uni-Party era is over, and there is a battle for the soul of our country between Reform and the Greens. That's why today we announce an important new policy. In order to deport all illegal migrants in Britain, we're going to need to detain tens of thousands at a time. Migrants will not be able to leave these detention centres, and each will be held there for a couple of weeks before being deported. So here's our promise. A Reform government will not put any migrant detention centres in any constituency with a Reform MP. We will not put them where Reform controls the council. And of the remaining areas, we will prioritise Green parliamentary constituencies and Green-controlled councils to put those migrant detention centres. That means areas like right here in Brighton. Put simply, if you vote in a Reform council or a Reform MP, we guarantee you will not have a migrant detention centre near you. However, if you vote Green, there's a very good chance that you will. This way, everyone gets what they vote for. Visit votegreen.getillegals.com. Britain is broken. Britain needs reform.
So this stuff just has way more persuasive power. This stuff is eye-catching. It's interesting. And again, you're looking at these two different persuasion models. And it's why I've been telling you, it's why I wrote the Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management, and I used the frame of hypnotism, of spells. Basically, the spell is breaking over fiat. Its top-down structures and its credibility systems simply don't work anymore. And their ability to conjure NPCs is failing because there's new tactics out there. There's new methods. There's new forms of spell casting. And it's funny that Tucker Carlson actually used my framing of magic to describe what Trump does and spell casting. And that, again, as a Bitcoiner, when you go back and you think about what those families did on Jekyll Island when they created the Federal Reserve, now that you understand that we're products of wants and fears, and that magic and spell casting is actually more legitimate to explain how persuasion works, you could see that just a handful of people could run the world and redefine reality. As Bitcoiners, Satoshi, I think, understood that. I think Satoshi understood exactly that when he created Bitcoin, that there's a virality to these systems. And once you start seeing it, it becomes persuasive. Bitcoin is one of the greatest persuasion games in the history of the world. Bitcoin has, nothing I've seen in my life has been as persuasive as Bitcoin over a short period. Here's Tucker Carlson actually describing what I'm saying, that Trump himself has this ability to use this kind of spell casting persuasion. And that's what we're up against. That's why I think of things in terms of black magic and the dark magic of fiat, and why Bitcoin is a counter spell to the hypnosis that's created. Hypnosis is real. And when people describe the reality distortion field, for example, around Steve Jobs. Around Trump, it's much greater. Trump has a much greater reality distortion field than even Steve Jobs. And he's flexing it right now big time. So here is Tucker describing that.
Instead, there were a lot of cowardly people, as there always are, and Trump engenders cowardice in the people around him through intimidation. And there is a kind of quality that he has that's spellbinding, and I think it probably literally is a spell. And the effect is to weaken people around him and make them more complicit.
So I found an example of this. That's good news. Here it is, guys. This is Trump casting a spell on his cabinet. Watch, this is powerful stuff. This is Trump conjuring a spell. They're done. They're screwed. He did the spell. Bang! It's like Harry Potter. Bang! Now you think what Trump, now you're afraid of him. Now you think what he thinks. He got you with the spell. So these new systems are working quite well, and the old systems are simply not. You're seeing what that guy did. You're seeing the spell break all over. And again, to gamble on a thing, and that's why I think the gambling mental illness of fiat is still the defining motivation of this system. It's why we're seeing the gambling mentality that Warren Buffett brought up continue to be the guiding principle of the Dems, and why I think all of this global libtardation is finished, because they're gambling on their old persuasive methods still working. They're gambling on the New York Times being able to win them an election or even the midterms. Here they are expressing their full gambling behavior. We see that NatSec Action, the former foreign policy hub for the left founded by Jake Sullivan and Ben Rhodes, is rebooting ahead of the 2028 Dem primary. So they're going to reboot this sludge money propaganda slop and think it's going to work, right? And Jake Sullivan and Ben Rhodes are two people who should never be allowed to have their fingers on the levers of national power again. Their entire portfolio is littered with failure. Their approach to power is designed to serve power itself, theirs, but it's just not persuasive anymore. It's just not working. Axios saying, oh, the dark money they use is being, they're rebranding it. Oh no, they're rebranding it. This is Jake Sullivan with his CIA wife, Goodlander. But again, Svetlana Lakova says the deep state groomed Jake Sullivan to become the next president. They arranged a marriage for a 40-plus-year-old bachelor Sullivan to marry Goodlander, the money. The wedding took place in 2015 around the start of the presidential campaign. Hillary was going to be installed, but the Sullivan-Goodlander dynasty was going to take over from the Clintons. That's why you have Bill Burns, Tony Blinken, etc. attending. To stop Donald Trump, Sullivan, Hillary, and with the help of Obama, Soros, U.S. and British intelligence, devised the Clinton plan to tie Donald Trump to Russia intelligence, aka Russiagate. President Trump won against all odds. Sullivan was devastated, so he, Soros, Obama, and co plotted to take out President Trump. The conspiracy continues to this day. Maggie Goodlander is the ringleader of the seditious six, and it is simply not going to work. Their old ways of persuasion. Did you look at the failure of Ben and the InfoWars rebrand this weekend? I mean, just absolutely pathetic. Zero on the persuasion level, just literally nothing. Let me see if I have here it is. This is blue sky humor. That's exactly what they think the Onion rebrand of InfoWars would look like. And, if it's perfectly okay, he drinks the blood of Forsaken. This is what they're going with here, guys. This is actually their plan. This is
blood. You can find this at the InfoWars.
This is the new
store.
Onion InfoWars.
This is human blood curated from the Forsaken and the sinners. All right, this is pure premium blood, tested, FDA unapproved.
And so Ben Collins, Ben Rhodes, all these guys failing in this whole effort. And here's the whole blue sky world and the get out the vote stuff from these same people. So here's a data leak from Miles Taylor, one of these same deep state people who was running another one of these the the GTFO ICE stuff. Data Republican find out Miles Taylor, anonymous, former DHS chief of staff, Google's security executive, launched a website called GTFO ICE that collects your full name, email, phone number, zip code to join an anti-ICE rapid response network and publishes the user information via a public API. A bunch of people signed up, 17,000. The sign-up data is exposed on a public REST API. No true authentication, no rate limiting, full records, names, emails, phone numbers, zip codes, timestamps. The man who ran the third largest federal department, 250,000 employees, 60 billion US trash token budget, who oversaw election security architecture and led counter-terrorism operations, then served as Google's head of national security policy, can't secure a sign-up form. But he does milk hundreds of thousands of NGO dollars in these credentials while freeloading off his fame as the person who wrote the infamous New York Times article, "I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration." And despite me pinging Miles Taylor about this 12 hours ago, the REST API is still wide open and exposed as of now. Everything has been turned over to FBI, HSI, ICE, and more agencies. As always, patience as I pull this together. And that's why this stuff is absolutely falling apart and not going anywhere. And you will see indeed. Here's the look, new investigative report, 1.5 million voter registrations found in New York State with identical signatures. Aaron McIntyre, democracy is so fake, it's hilarious. You've never seen a legitimate election in your life. Everything you think about political legitimacy is a joke. And we've all learned that in America. And that's why, again, things are going into these irregular persuasion molds. That's why things are changing so quickly. And that's why the Trump model of persuasion is working. That's why financial flows are working. That's why the audits are working. We're becoming much more attuned to money being stolen, where money's going. We're seeing the world more in persuasion terms around following the money. And that's becoming more persuasive than what someone tells you is good or bad to do, and if you're a good or bad person. And no one, compare what we saw from that fella in the UK learning off Trump, talking about sending the deportation facilities and guaranteeing they're going to be in green voting areas. Look at the way Trump has handled this from the beginning. And here is, one of the best students of this change, Spencer Pratt, who has had quite a month. Here he is unloading a new video, and just look at the persuasion in this video. I mean, this is why I continue to predict it is a absolute bloodbath for Democrats at the end of the summer, and why we're headed to a confirmed golden age, and why I've been telling you that California is turning red. Here is the mayoral candidate of LA, Spencer Pratt, who I think is going to win.
Hey, Los Angeles, are you aware that socialists in LA city government are stealing your money?
We just finished doing a tour of the site with the Bureau of Engineering, the Bureau of Contract Administration, and our contractors to check out the installation of the 16 new modular homes that will include 64 interim housing beds. Northeast New Beginnings is only possible because my team and I worked to get a grant from the state, $16 million to build 64 new beds in Council District 1 of interim housing.
I'm sorry, what? $16 million for 64 beds?
$16 million to build 64 new beds?
That's $250,000 per bed. So let's forget the fact that the DEA reports that 90% of the homeless population in LA are hardcore criminal drug users.
Especially in Los Angeles, there's a lot of it. How many people are using illicit drugs in the homeless community? I would say it's incredibly high.
20%, 30%.
Of the overall problem?
Yeah.
Over 90%.
And let's pretend for a second that these people just had some medical bills come in all at once that made them lose their job, and that they're a single mom and they just need to float 3 to 6 months of paychecks to get back on their feet, 3 to 6 months of the median income, like $15,000 to $25,000. We're spending $250,000 per bed. You could just give them that money and they'd be set for 5 years. What the hell are we doing? These crazy socialists on the city council are legitimately just stealing our tax dollars and doling it out to their friends, and they rub it in your face too. She jokes about covering up the graffiti with a nice painting.
And obviously we're gonna get rid of the graffiti and replace it with a nice paint job to make sure it's welcoming for everybody.
Meanwhile, fire victims in the Palisades are getting their burned out lots vandalized by commie street animals all of your neighborhoods are riddled with tagging and garbage. No help for you, but we're going to spend $16 million for 64 homeless people to not have to endure the hardship of seeing a bit of graffiti outside their $250,000 bed. 64 people. There are 64,000 homeless people in Los Angeles. This psycho socialist is bragging about spending $16 million of your money to cater to 0.01% of the homeless problem.
$16 million.
You think these socialists have any interest in solving this? Of course not. Who's vetting who goes into these housing units? Are they drug testing? Are these just going to turn into $250,000 air-conditioned fentanyl tents? Why not just give them the money? I'll tell you why. Because these corrupt DSA politicians can't steal it if they just give it as direct aid. Just like the fire aid scam. They'll never give an individual direct financial assistance. It always has to be laundered through one of Austin Miller's or Nithya Raman's NPOs so their friends can do God knows what with it. It goes to these companies that make these $250,000 units. It's all a scam. And notice, this isn't just Angelinos that are being robbed. She's using state grants.
My team and I worked to get a grant from the state.
So pay attention, folks. Socialists in Los Angeles are everybody's problem. Goblins like Eunice are gobbling up all your tax dollars, and they are coming for more. This is how socialism starts. Vague platitudes that feel nice and soften the language so the real problems never get addressed. It's the velvet glove for the iron fist. These are just people experiencing homelessness.
People experiencing homelessness?
Why do they always talk like this? Why can't they just talk like a normal person? Because socialists always lie. Always. We need to end this failed experiment and put a stop to this fraudulent waste of our tax dollars. If you live anywhere in California, you need to support my campaign for mayor of Los Angeles, because this theft of your tax dollars will only continue. Go to mayorpratt.com and help me put an end to this scam.
$16 million.
So he's got another one that everyone's talking about too this weekend. Crazy ad. It's a short one, but it's same idea. Here's James Wood saying crazy ad, but he's right. Somebody has to take out the basura and save. Los Angeles has been it has become living in a sewer under Karen Bass.
Latino por Pratt, tú verás. Mayor 2026. Ahí va. Mayor Karen took a trip way off the map while the hills caught fire. She was posting from abroad, Palisades though out to Dana, smoke in the sky. We were coughing in the kitchen, she was saying bye-bye. Spencer, saca la basura. Look what she left on our block. LA looking like a closet where the junk can talk. Spencer, saca la basura. Bag it up, roll it out to the street. Latinos por Pratt, we're singing, cause we're tired of this dirty beat.
So great stuff. And here's a mariachi trumpets go so hard, man. Yeah, they're good. So he's doing great, right? And hold on, I'm getting buzzed here. And you know, here's a fun video that he put out at the beginning of all of this, just to show you what radicalized him. And I'd say this is similar to what radicalized a lot of people, a lot of Bitcoiners. You know, you see how bad this theft is, and you see what they've taken from you. Here's Spencer Pratt, and just the days before, he used to live in the Palisades, and here is his last video taken from the neighborhood that burned down. And this is how you make a radical. This is like the scene in the John Wick when they kill his dog, you know? Look at this.
Hold it.
That's what he had going on in Palisades. Imagine living like that in a city like LA with all these beautiful hummingbirds, and now you got to deal with communists burning your neighborhood down and then not building it back, and then virtue signaling, and then not caring, and all of this stuff. So it's why I think that you're going to see, again, all of these, you know, everything everything people have learned from Trump, everything they've learned with humor injected into politics, not entering the frame, not arguing with the communists. That's why this entire aesthetic is taking over. And why I said, from now straight through the midterms, it's going to be debates around gerrymandering, election integrity, the audits. All of this stuff is going to become much more pressing and a much bigger story. Here's Trump making his signature joke about Ilhan Omar. Really fun stuff. And again, this was from his humorous stand-up routine he did without any of the laughter prompts, but he gets it just like a sitcom or stand-up comedian.
Ilhan Omar. She comes here from Somalia, and she tells us how to run the United States of America. She says, the Constitution gives me certain rights, and I demand that I be given these rights. Get the hell out, what a phony. And then she married her brother to come in. I believe she married her brother, which is totally illegal. Although it's a lovely couple, actually, but it's a little bit on the illegal side. Darling, I love you very much. Good night, brother. Let's go to bed. Good night. Isn't she despicable? I can't stand watching her. Ilhan Omar.
So good. And then, with the gerrymandering thing, here's a little update from what happened with the race-based stuff that came out of the Supreme Court last week and why you're going to see more of this gerrymandering stuff. Here's Prof. St. Onge with a breakdown of what's going on with the gerrymandering.
The Supreme Court just handed a huge win to Republicans trying to gerrymander congressional districts. Like Democrats have been doing for 50 years, this could shift 18 seats to Republicans in the near term and 30 to 40 seats when the dust settles, which matters because that would take the House of Representatives, which originates every law, from Republican 1/3 of the time to Republican almost half the time. So the background is both parties draw congressional districts to put just enough of their voters in to outvote the other guy. Do it right, and you can win 100% of the seats with just 60% of the vote. You divide and conquer the other guy's voters. It ain't pretty. 40% of voters have no say, but both parties try to do it. The problem is while Democrats merrily gerrymandered their states, they were blocking Republican gerrymanders as racist, since blacks vote 90% Democrat, so drawing out a blue district often means drawing out a black district. Of course, Republicans were not doing it because of race. Republicans happily accept votes from black people. They were doing it because those voters are blue. The result was Democrats gerrymandered every single state in New England, despite 40% of voters choosing Trump. But in the South, Democrats held 24 seats, despite even fewer voters choosing Kamala. So the Supreme Court, even the score saying if it looks political, it probably is political, no matter which party. In raw numbers, the decision could flip 18 seats, according to an analysis by Axios, bumping the Texas redistrict to 6 seats, adding 3 for Florida, 2 each for Alabama and Georgia, and another 4 plus 2 blue districts that go battleground. Would leave at least 6 southern states with no blue districts: Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Missouri, just like New England and soon California. Zooming out nationwide, of the states Trump won against Kamala, Democrats got 69 congressional seats, almost 1 in 4. But in the states Kamala won, Republicans got just 1 in 7 seats, 39. So fixing that would be a 30-seat difference. Election analyst 538 actually pegged it higher at a 40-seat swing if every state, red and blue, withdraws. For perspective, Republicans currently hold the House by just 5 seats, which is why rhinos are in the driver's seat. They are the swing vote. Now, all those juicy seats will not flip overnight. In each state, Republicans have to put away the fundraising phone and draw new districts. Just 1 hour after the ruling, Florida did pass a new map, shifting 3 seats. Alabama and Tennessee called special sessions for another 2 to 3. Louisiana and South Carolina could flip yet another 2 to 3. Georgia's lieutenant governor called for a special session that could flip a couple more. So what's next, brought to you by the Bitcoin Way.
So you're going to continue to see this redistricting. And so we've got the audits We've got the gerrymandering stuff that's going to go on. We've got this new persuasion level up that has been proven now over a few elections to be much more powerful than the fiat top-down stuff. And finally, I think the clincher for the midterms and to predict where things are headed politically, because remember, whatever lethargy or lack of enthusiasm people say Trump now has amongst his base, it all comes down to accountability, right? People, when Democrats are out there saying, well, Trump he's got the MAGA civil war, Iran, and the magic, the spell binding for people that are weak that you heard from Tucker Carlson. The solution to all of that, and I think, it's the side you're not hearing from Democrats, is that most of the people who are not as enthusiastic about Trump, it's because he's not dark Trump enough. It's not dark MAGA enough. They want heads absolutely off. They want people swinging from trees. In particular, COVID folks. And now I think that would be the number one story for most, the season of accountability, we call it here. And I've predicted there will be a season of accountability. And now here you see Tulsi Gabbard come out and mention the one everyone wants to see toast, and that is Fauci. And not only do you have Tulsi saying it, you've got here Naval also reiterating Rand Paul says the COVID cover-up goes all the way to the top. Fauci funded the Wuhan lab. Senior intelligence officials hid classified evidence from the president himself. Scientists were silenced. Millions paid the price. The DOJ has until May 11th to prosecute Fauci before the statute of limitations runs out. I am not letting this go. The American people deserve justice. Naval retweets. So Naval doesn't get involved in this stuff too often. And when he does, take note. He says designed by the NIH in North Carolina, assembled in China. And it's why I think you're going to get this. And here is Tulsi describing what's in store.
Jay Bhattacharya, the new NIH director with, as well as Secretary Kennedy, is looking at the gain of function research that in the case of the Wuhan lab, as well as many of these other biolabs around the world, was actually US funded and leads to this dangerous kind of research that in many examples has resulted in either a pandemic or some other major health crisis.
Well, let me ask you specifically, because we already know that EcoHealth Alliance was partnering with this Wuhan lab to do gain of function research.
That's right.
We just have never been able to have somebody say, it was that exact experiment that led to this COVID bug. But have we gotten there? What's the new thing that you're digging in on?
We are working on that with Jay Bhattacharya and look forward to being able to share that, hopefully very soon.
Okay.
That specific
link.
Correct, between the gain of function research and what we saw with COVID-19.
I mean, that would be extraordinary because just so the audience knows, if that's true, if it was Peter Daszak's research with the Wuhan so-called bat lady that caused this pandemic, then we did fund it. Then Anthony Fauci helped fund the pandemic.
The thing that he denied over and over and over to Senator Rand Paul's questioning.
That's right, under oath.
Under oath, exactly. So is it any wonder that he sought a preemptive pardon for anything during a certain period of time by President Biden before he left office?
And then strong-armed and smeared people like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, anybody who came out and said, I don't know if that's natural. This actually smacks of lab.
And the reason why this is so important is not just what happened in the past, it's because this gain of function research is happening in biolabs around the world.
So it looks like it's happening, guys. And I'll tell you if it doesn't, but that's why here, the great Bitcoiner, Ben Hart, the break dancing Bitcoiner, I'm a fan. He comes out here and says, Republicans will win the midterms. In fact, it's looking more and more like a disaster for Dems. That's where I'm at. This is a circling the drain moment. That's why today I saw Cubes liked it, right? So Cubes said, I think you said, where was it? We audit them for a change. I thought I saw, where did I see? Love the video cover. Yeah, so the thumbnail I made today, that's what it was. It was, all this fiat system circling the drain. It's the communications, it's all of that stuff circling the drain, dollars circling the drain. That's what I see the Dems doing. They're circling the drain. And negatives for GOP gas prices, like I said, I think that'll go away. Military operation approval rating is low. It's not far from where he normally is. And it's true, many people don't much like Trump. They think he's gruff, rude, and don't like his posts and don't get the joke. But they vote for him anyway because he's much better than the alternative. Open borders, rampant crime, transgender surgeries on children's schools, our leftist indoctrination camps, insufferable wokeness. History shows that the party that controls the White House loses seats in the midterm elections. Positives for the GOP: gas prices will come down, the Iran military operation will be in the rear view mirror, and then obvious success. Voters reward success. We can contrast the Venezuela and Iran operations, thus probably the liberation of Cuba, with Biden's disastrous Afghan withdrawal, which gave Putin the green light to invade Ukraine. Competence versus total incompetence. In the wake of the Iran success, Trump and the GOP will play endless clips of Democrats openly rooting for the Iran regime and the defeat of our military, because Democrats now link America's success to Trump's success. If America succeeds, then Trump succeeds. Democrats don't want that, so they root for America's failure at every point, and voters can see this. Whatever you think of Trump, it's clear he loves America. It's not at all clear that Democrats even like America. In fact, Democrats are constantly telling us America is racist and was built on a foundation of racism. The generic ballot polls actually show a close national race, with Dems now leading on the generic ballot by 3 to 5%. But these generic polls showing party preference are just snapshots. Historically, Dems have led in generic polls. If Republicans are within 3% of Dems in generic ballot polls at the end, the GOP usually gains seats in the House. And the midterm elections are not a national election. There are many different elections in different districts and states, where often local issues are a key factor and the quality of the candidates. The GOP right now has an enormous fundraising advantage. The Democrat National Committee is broke. Currently incumbent Republican senators appear to be in solid shape. We will probably lose the North Carolina seat. Susan Collins will probably hold on to Maine, as the governor just dropped out of the race, and now she's running against the crazy nut with the Nazi tattoo. We have opportunities for pickups in Michigan, New Hampshire, and Georgia. Because of the recent Supreme Court ruling banning congressional districts based on race, the GOP appears to be positioned to pick up a net 15 seats based on that alone. And the Virginia Supreme Court appears to cancel the new congressional map Dems want, because the referendum held on this was illegally conducted. The new congressional map in Virginia would have netted Dems 4 seats, but it's probably gone. Trump's MAGA base is solid. A recent poll said 100. I don't buy those. Elections are a binary choice. Democrats are running on abolish ICE, which voters will hear as open borders. This is the same as the Democrat demand the defund the police. Americans don't want open borders and the police defunded. Democrats continue to block funding for the Department of Homeland Security because they want to defund ICE, blah, blah, blah. So indeed, I think that you're going to see this stuff just line up, right? It's not happening because the Democrats can't help themselves. They are incapable of not sounding insane to the average person. Very few people liked Richard Nixon. Most people actively disliked Nixon, but he won 49 states in 72 because of the radicalism of the left. The phrase often repeated back then was "hold your nose." And indeed, back to 80,000 for Bitcoin. There you go. There you go, everyone. Things are happening and we're having fun. Let me end this shared screen. So there you go, guys. I'm about to cut the broadcast. Thanks for coming this morning. I appreciate it. Lots of folks in the chat. We shall see each other tomorrow. We'll have another fun morning together. I know they've got some good stuff coming up on after here with Borja's State of Bitcoin Markets. Got a few guests coming in. Enjoy, everyone. Stick around for more. I'm going to play the logo followed by the thanks for watching screen. I just want to say thanks for watching. Enjoy 80,000 Bitcoin. We're back, baby. Peace.